I want you to imagine the following situation. Your company is putting on a conference for your clients, and you're planning on simply going to support and attend this, basically be a listener in the audience. But as you walk through the conference doors a little bit early, your boss walks up to you and says, here's what happened. Your senior colleague has come down sick. In about an hour is when he or she was supposed to present. Can you please cover for them? Other than panic, what do you do? Now, thankfully, the hypothetical situation I posed at the beginning of this video is a pretty rare one. That's not going to happen very often, but it does happen from time to time. I've seen this firsthand. And so in this video, I'm going to give you a couple of tips of how you could deal with this situation or any hypothetical situation where you are asked or expected to deliver a speech while having very little time or notice or ability to prepare to do so. The first thing I'd suggest in this situation is to start off by giving yourself a little bit of grace and knowing that you've been thrown in a tough spot. If you are not preparing to speak and then all of a sudden you've been told you've got to present for half an hour, 1 hour from now, and maybe on a subject that you're not overly familiar with, that is a tricky situation. That is scary for anybody. Please know that you are not expected to deliver the perfect speech that is going to get a standing ovation. At that point, the goal is to just get through it, and hopefully the audience won't even notice that there was a hiccup that happened with the original agenda. If you can make them believe that you were always supposed to deliver that presentation and you got through it, that is a home run as far as I'm concerned. That is almost the ultimate goal. So give yourself grace. Don't set your expectations too crazy high. But with that said, the next few tips will show you how you can get through this situation. My first suggestion is to make the speech your own. That is tough given the time constraints and everything along those lines. But if you have a chance, let's say your colleague had used a PowerPoint presentation, don't just use their slides. If you have a chance to quickly, even if it's 15 minutes, go and make some edits or change around their slides a little bit, remove a few slides, do that, because the more you feel like the presentation was built by you rather than somebody else, that is going to help you in your speech. I've seen many people try to inherit other people's presentations, and it's so difficult and it's often painful to watch this because it's almost like they're seeing the slides for their first time as well. And they're reading all of the words off of the slides. And that's not where your focus and attention should be. The slides are for your audience. You shouldn't be referencing those too much. You should be looking at them and speaking. And if there's specific data points that are really important that you're going to forget, of course, keep those on the slides and you can look back to reference those specific numbers that are very important. But if these are generally just themes, like if you're talking about how your company's performance was the previous year and you generally know the answer to that, your slide can simply say company performance in 2022 or whatever the year was. Like that's all the slide has to say. And that will trigger you to know, okay, now is when I share the information I know about how our company did last year. And hopefully, if your boss is asking you to take on this presentation, he or she has a bit of confidence in you that you generally know the subject matter. So in that case, make the slides as brief as possible and make sure that you have your touch on them, that you're adding your own language so that it feels as much like your presentation as possible. One of the best tips I can give you for delivering a speech on short notice is to include personal stories. Personal stories are great because you've already sort of tested them. If these are stories you've told to family or friends in the past, you've kind of received a sample size audience and how their feedback has been on that speech. And if they laughed or told you it was a great story, you know you've already got some validation that that could work well in the speech as long as it relates to whatever the subject matter is. But you'd be surprised how often you can make that connection. Even if it's a loose connection, Often you can use a personal story and reinforce a point of that story and then connect it to whatever it is you're trying to communicate. So if you're in a pinch, definitely think about how you could incorporate a personal story that you've already told in the past. And then as for your slides, especially if you have the chance to make some brief edits to the slides, all you need is a photo, an image, a couple words that trigger your memory to say, oh, okay, now is the time I tell the personal story before I move to the next slide. That's all you need in terms of what you add to the PowerPoint presentation. The other great thing about personal stories is that they're going to fill up some of that time. If you have a half-hour speech that you need to step in for, that's a lot of time to just be standing in front of the audience talking about information you weren't planning to talk about. But if you can add a couple personal stories, that may take up 40% of the time you're scheduled to speech. So now you're not worried about the full half an hour, you're worried about a smaller portion and filling that up. So personal stories, the best thing you could do when it comes to delivering a speech on short notice. If you're really thrown under the bus and you have no opportunity to make any changes to the slides and you don't know a ton of information about what the slides are and it's simply just trying to hold all of this together, you may be able to use a little bit of humor to make light of the situation. And I say this suggestion cautiously because considering this is a work or a professional event, you don't want to come across as amateur or make excuses for the situation that you're in. So tread carefully when it comes to this, but you may be able to inject a little bit of humor. And I'll use a personal example. A few months ago, I had the situation where a coworker asked me to step in for his presentation at one of my 9-to-5 work events that's in the real estate industry. And so I did that for him, but I literally didn't know what the slides were. And the joke I made was that James Corden, who's a talk show host, he had this section or the segment called Where's Your TED At? And the idea is that people would give a presentation and then the slides would come up and they would have no idea what the slide was going to be and they had to just roll with it. And it was usually outrageous things. And so that's how I opened it up to the audience, is saying basically, welcome to my version of Where's Your TED At? I'm going to learn with you what these slides are. Let's roll through. And thankfully, I had a bit of background knowledge about what the individual was presenting on, so it wasn't completely on the fly, but the audience related. They knew the spot I was in, and it got a few laughs, and I was able to get through the presentation that way. Here's my last tip, and some of you may push back on this and not like what I have to say, but my tip is be prepared. But wait, how can we be prepared to this hypothetical situation that we had no idea we were going to have to step in for a colleague that we didn't know was going to be sick? Are you crazy? How can you prepare for that? Sometimes we have opportunities to have something on the back burner and be ready. And every situation is going to be a little bit different. Sometimes you're completely blindsided. But in this hypothetical, let's say your colleague came into work earlier that week with a bit of a sniffle. In the back of your mind, you can say, okay, hopefully they're okay for the big work conference, but is there a chance they might be sick? And if that's the case, is there a chance my boss may ask me as the next person? Perhaps you're the second in command at a company. Know that in the back of your mind, try to think of, okay, is there a situation where this could land on my desk or on my plate in order of something that needs to be done? And if the answer is even a 5% it's possible, then in your mind, just have a little bit of planning of, well, what would I do in that situation? What are some things I could talk about? How could I make it my own? And I can't tell you the number of times that even if it was me driving to a work event or driving to a social event where I thought maybe there's a slight chance somebody asked me to say a few words, I've thought in my head on that drive, what could I say? And I come up with something basic. And 95% of the time, I've never used it. I've never needed to. But the point is, in that rare 5%, of opportunities, the couple times it has happened, people are so impressed that it looks like you're winging it, but you get through that situation with professionalism, and people are blown away because that is something not most people can do. So, if at all possible, prepare for the unexpected, prepare for the things you can't really prepare for, and just know that maybe this is a situation that could happen. So, what can you do from an accountability standpoint to be as ready as possible? I hope this video on how to come up with a presentation on a short amount of notice has been beneficial to you. If it has, please subscribe to my channel, turn on those notifications. Let me know in the comments, has this happened to you? What do you think of my tips? Am I missing anything? All of that engagement helps my channel so much. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you are looking for a little bit of coaching help with your next speech, I am providing one-on-one evaluations. My contact email is in the video description. Reach out to me and let's discuss what that could look like.